Hi, everybody. My name is Phil. Right click Valentine, as Sean was like saying, "What's up with that right click?" That was my trail name back in 2015. Been in recovery since 1987. So this year, at the end of the year, it'll be, God willing, it'll be 38 years in recovery. Um, I've been retired now since October of last year, but still have my toes in doing some coaching and some training and um, um, so still pursuing this a little bit. Um, I was the executive director, 25 years there at CCAR at the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. Now retired and living in Warwick, Rhode Island on the water. That's not my backyard. That's actually, I think, Nantucket, a picture I took. And today, I would like you to introduce yourselves, where you're sitting, and we want to talk about today's thing is athlete, but we're going to spin it a little bit. We did all the A's from my retirement, and this was the final A. So some of the roles I wanted to have, and for me, athlete was keeping my body fit enough so I could do the other things I wanted to do, right? Um, but I am curious, and I want to know, again, your name, where you're sitting, and describe what you would consider a personal athletic achievement. And that could take any form that you think is athletic. So I have a couple things that came to mind. Like I was playing in a church league when I was 15 years old, and I hit a game-winning shot at the buzzer, from the top of the key. That was like an athletic achievement. But more recently, I have my big kayak that I get to wheel down to the water and go fishing. It's got an electric trolling motor, so I don't have to paddle too hard. But I've been I came off the trail in March of this year because of some like chest pains and all of that, and still figured out what's going wrong. But some of the early tests indicate, yeah, that was probably a good idea that I came off the trail. So, but I've been getting a lot stronger, and so I have to pick this kayak up. It has wheels, and I wheel it down to the water. And just the other day, I picked the kayak up, wheeled it back to the shed, pushed it into my little boathouse, and I was like not winded and felt good about it. I said, I'm getting stronger. To me, that was an athletic achievement and an indicator that, I'm trending in the right direction. So I'm curious about name, where you're sitting, and anything you want to consider an athletic achievement. It could be recent, it could be from your past, it could be anything at all. I'm sure we all have different ideas of what that means. Who'd like to go first? They don't like this one. Anita does, though. She's my champion. Thank you, Anita.
Mhm. Hi, hi everyone. Anita, recovery coach for CCAR. I'm sitting, oops, sorry. I am sitting at the Hartford Recovery Community Center. Um, for me, athletic achievement at this stage, I've had multiple surgeries in the past couple years. So just even getting like a mile in of walking is, an achievement for me, and I'm hoping to just get stronger and stronger.
Amen. Continue.
Thank you.
Sean.
My name is Sean Parch. I work with the Recovery Community Network here in St. Cloud, Minnesota. In athletic achievements, I'm not so much an up guy like push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups. I'm more of a down guy. Sit down, lay down. I like to
I've
wolf down.
heard that before.
I have mastered that. No, the biggest probably physical thing I've done was last week I stood for 46 hours and realized, well, for that Recovery Coach Academy, maybe not every single minute, but it was in a huge auditorium and they didn't have sound. So I literally had to stay kind of walking and realized just how out of shape I am because by the second day I would go back to the hotel and I'm just like, oh, so Sean needs to get up and get his body in motion a little more.
Okay. Amber, good to see you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amber, and I am in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I think for an athletic achievement, I do all sorts of things. So, like this past weekend, I was playing softball, and it was about 92 degrees. So, just the fact that I had a double header and we won both games, and that was pretty cool because I thought I was gonna pass out. And then also golfed 18 holes walking, which was not a smart move when it was that hot, but I was able to make it through all 18 holes. So
Wow.
I would consider that an achievement.
Yeah, so me too. Thank you. Hello, Ruth. Wonderful to see you here.
And right back at you, Phil. Great to see you looking so well.
Well enough.
Well enough, exactly. That's our standard. Well enough, good enough.
Mhm.
And great to see everybody else. It's always fabulous to be on a CCAR call. I am broadcasting today from beautiful Brooklyn, where it is a mere 90 degrees. I gave in and switched on the AC. My athletic achievement is undoubtedly 80 words per minute touch typing.
Nice. Yeah. Back when you had to get time for typing. That's fun.
That
Uh,
was one skill my mother taught me.
I don't think you're Michael.
So I am. My name is Michael Mazel, and
Oh, it is.
it is. I know. Um, I'm in Salida, Colorado, and
Oh,
I would say my athletic achievement is actually stretching daily. I'm an ultra runner and endurance athlete, and I hate stretching. And for the first time ever, I've been able to touch my toes, and so stretching. And so I think that is a big achievement in my world for someone who has never been able to touch their toes.
wow. Maybe that's a worthy goal for me. Thank you for that, Michael. Uh, Hello, New London.
Hey, hi, I'm Andrew Taylor. I'm a volunteer here at the New London Center. An athletic achievement of mine is, well, I was all state in track and field in high school, but I just recently started retraining to do a half marathon this October. So been
Wow.
getting up there. The heat it's been a little tough to do it, but I am still on track to meet my goal.
Sounds good. Continue. Thank you. Ed.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Phil. My name is Ed Havlovic, and I'm coming to you live from Weehawken, New Jersey. As far as my physical or my athletic achievement, I would say it's less than any particular one achievement, but probably my athletic consistency of being able to continue to jog still today.
Mm.
At my age, it's a gift, and I'm very mobile, and I get to jog anywhere between 6 to 8 miles a week. And for me, that's a great achievement.
Yeah. Tremendous. Thank you. Anybody else? Where your name, where you're sitting, and an athletic achievement, however you might define that. Completely up to you. Hello, Jay.
Hey, Phil, thank you so much. Jay here from coming to you from, where am I today? I am up in the Lake Champlain Isles in Vermont, North Hero.
Mhm.
We have a summer house up here. Um, but Phil, we live full time down right off the AT in the Berkshires,
Nice.
Massachusetts. So you may have passed us by a couple of years back, but we
Mhm.
we get we get a lot of through hikers this time of year. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And I enjoy picking them up, throwing them in the back of the Jeep, and taking them to a shower maybe and something to eat because they stink, and I know you know that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I just retired in in April, and I think one of the a zillion kind of ups and downs over all those years. Um, but uh, as far as an achievement is kind of pivoting right now, and continue to explore this recovery business, for the lack of a better recovery coaching, for the lack of a better term. Long-term sobriety, and perhaps some time to give back. So really good to be here. Thanks for leading us.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen, good to see you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen la Stephen White.
I
And
know.
and I'm coming to you from I'm currently in Buffalo, New York, which I just returned to this morning. And that ties into my athletic achievement. So I was just in Soria, Morocco for a music festival, a Ganal music festival. Anyway, I stayed in the Medina, and I used to run. I used to be a 5K runner, and I haven't run because I've had foot problems and stuff. But for some reason, while I was in the Medina there, I got inspired the first day to run to the square, which it wasn't very far. It was maybe like a half a mile. But so every day while I was there for 6 days, I got up and I ran to the Medina, which was quite an athletic achievement, given that I haven't run 5Ks in about 5 or 6 years. So, but
Wow.
it was pretty inspiring to get up and run down to the seawall each morning while I was there. So that's my athletic achievement.
Thank you. Hello, Sandy.
Good morning. Sandy Valentine in Providence, Rhode Island today. And um, I am surrounded by athletes in my family. I've raised athletes. I absolutely hate to be dirty or to sweat. So athleticism has not been a huge part of my life if I can avoid it. But a couple of years, well, 2 years ago, I hiked with um, my husband and most of our children to the top of one of the mountains in Acadia. And the year before, I had hiked to the top of Acadia Mountain. And those were huge achievements for me because I don't find it enjoyable. And yet I wanted to do it. So that's about it for my athletic achievements. I mean, I kind of fall off my shoes and break bones. So doing riskier stuff is not usually in my lane.
I think you had a pretty cool one this past weekend too.
Yeah, so I got a new kayak that has pedals because I've had two frozen shoulders, if anybody knows what that's like. And so I could pedal my kayak. But what I didn't realize, if for anybody that's laid on their back and done those like bicycle moves for your abs,
Huh.
yeah, the pedals are up high on this kayak. So you're kind of doing that. So Michael, I saw that look on your face. In about 2 months, a core may be sprouting inside my abdomen. It's got
Right.
a reservation if I keep doing it.
Thank you. Tony.
Sorry about that. I'm Tony Moon. I'm actually from Georgia, a little further south, where it's a little warmer down here than up y'all's up north. But athletic thing, the achievement. So I've been really excited that I had some shoulder issues, and then, as you get younger, your body doesn't work like it used to. But
Mhm.
so no, I've been able to do 6 unassisted pull-ups again, which is cool for me. So
Really?
I'm happy about that.
That's amazing. Cool. Michael.
The most I've done is crumble up a piece of paper and throw it to the wastebasket and make it
Yeah.
Larry Bird style.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I gotta get talking about that. I've been meaning to get some of my nephews together and play some basketball, and
Uh-huh.
I think I'm doing that as soon as this heat dies down, that we can be out there and I can get the kids motivated to do that as well. But
Well,
no achievement.
when you come visit me, I'm going to put you on Sandy's kayak, and you can paddle around.
Right? Yeah, I'll do it. I'll
Yeah.
do it.
Anybody else want to go? Name where you're sitting and any type of what you would consider an athletic achievement, personal athletic achievement. We heard from an ultra runner to a guy that can throw a wadded paper into a basket. That's kind of like the range of where we are. Hi, Victor.
Hey Phil, uh, glad to meet you for the first time. Um, so I'm here in Boulder, Colorado, and athletic achievement. I ran a 5K for suicide prevention with one of the peers that I supervise,
Huh.
and also some other recovery agencies a while back. I've run 5Ks before, but for this one I trained for, and I think my time was like 41 minutes, so it wasn't the best. But still, being able to do it with one of the peers that I supervise, and also doing it for a cause of youth suicide prevention, um, was very meaningful to me.
Hmm. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? We're looking for anybody else want to go. It doesn't have to be everybody, but I just wanted to see if anybody else wanted to go. A little caveat that, oh, I think they're gone. So they hooked the electricity up next door. So maybe we won't lose power here. So they got that done well enough. So, but I told Michael I got a backup plan if for some reason the power goes out here. Um, there are four quadrants to wellness, right? And they're physical, mental, spiritual, and we've talked a lot in this forum and in a lot of the academies about one that's not often addressed, and that's the emotional. But those four quadrants I borrowed them or learned about them from Don Coyhus and his organization at the time, whitebison.org, where they talk about the four quadrants of healing. And I've really been really interested in the emotional quadrant for several years now, just really exploring what that means. Um, but the one that athlete brings up is obviously physical, right? And I think a lot of times when I was back in, 30 plus years ago, they would talk, we got to heal physically, then we heal mentally. And then sometimes they would talk about the spiritual component of recovery, but rarely back then did I ever hear anybody talk about emotional, except for maybe Father Martin, who had the chalk talk, and he would talk about E over I, or I over E, intelligence over emotion. And I had lived the exact opposite. I emotions ruled my entire existence, and it was over the I. But that's all I ever really heard about it. But I wanted to explore with you guys um, the physical quadrant and how it relates to recovery coaching. And I want some examples, some ideas. Do you address it? Do you not address it? What do you do when the people want to talk about it? Anything at all. What do you think about the physical quadrant of recovery? Big question, I know. But if one of you is brave and goes first, that'll elicit all types of responses, I'm sure. Stefan.
Thank you. I'll be brave and share first. So,
Yeah.
I reflect upon this a lot, and periodically it comes up. Uh, it sort of periodically comes up with one of the exercises in the Recovery Coach Academy.
Right.
I think it's
Right.
the self-care piece, and we explored Jerome, right? And Jerome is I forget the wording, very skilled recovery coach, but he models poor self-care. He's overweight, he smokes excessively. So that always becomes an avenue to talk about because people make, as you know, people make all kind of they draw their own conclusions about Jerome. Well, he probably does this, he probably does that. You know, so it becomes an interesting segue sometimes to talk about self-care and the physical dimension, right? How do we take care of ourselves, and what does it mean as a recovery coach to potentially model good self-care or poor self-care in that quadrant. So I always like to have that discussion because people, like even for us as we checked in, people are at different places in terms of what that realm of their physical well-being means for them. But I think it's always a good opportunity for people to give people an opportunity to check in with themselves, right? Is this something that has meaning for me, right? What is my practice, right? Around taking care of my physical health, right? And am I going to be an ultra athlete? Maybe not, but am I going to get up and take care of the physical demands of my well-being, whatever they are, right? And maybe extend myself or be willing to kind of stretch, I guess, is what I'd say. So that's usually how I think about it. And on a personal note, right? One of the things that like I haven't been doing so well lately, but I try to get to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, right? And that was rooted in, watching my father really struggle with some physical health demands that ultimately led to his demise. And even though that was over close to 30 years ago, it still sticks in my mind and it's a motivating factor for me. So,
So let me ask you a quick question. Describe the difference between how you're feeling when you go to the gym regularly and you don't.
it's a world of difference. I mean, I feel invigorated. I feel more optimistic about like life's journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and hopeful too, right? Like, I mean, some days I get up, I drag myself to the gym, and then when I do it, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm so glad I did. And the world just looks and feels brighter and less heavy.
Wow. Thank you for that. Michael.
Um, I'll just lower my hand. I love this topic for the physical health and kind of how I always address it with clients. And I just think it's really important to kind of reframe our relationships with our bodies just because I did not have a good relationship with my body at all in active addiction and how I used to treat it and being able to talk about physical activity in really manageable steps because like I don't expect people to go out and run like 20 miles every day like I do. It's like, like can you get up and like is a win, choosing to go for a walk around the block, before you go to work? Is it like what is it? It's being able to celebrate those little itty bitty wins and to let people know that they compound because I think that physical health can be really intimidating and there's so many different ways that we can approach it as coaches. And so I think just being able to be that eternal cheerleader of just saying, hey, like you went and did how many steps today? Like you did one push up, like anything is a win compared to how we treated ourselves in active addiction. And so it's just being really mindful of, I think, gifting grace and patience because it can be really challenging for some and for other people it's not. And then that's easier. But I think it's a really beautiful opportunity to help build self-confidence and love of self again.
Well said. Thank you, Michael. Victor.
I guess, on a personal level, just being vulnerable and realizing I can't do it by myself. So I went to my doctor and I started like a weight loss medication, like literally like last week. So that was like a big step for me. And taking steps, so 10,000 steps wasn't a day. Going up to 12,000 steps, I realized, man, I feel a lot better. Only took about 45 minutes. And so those days where I don't do it, I definitely feel it. But for the peers that I supervise and the people that I work with in the community, access is number one. You don't have insurance, you're not accessing a single thing, right? So making sure that they're in the system, that they can navigate the system. There's a cultural piece to accessing healthcare. Some people haven't been to an office, so they don't feel comfortable in offices. Also, I live in Boulder, Colorado, very kind of exclusive. When's the last time you've been to apothecary, Mr. Homeless person, right? Like, oh, never. Well, come into this apothecary, see this other side of medicine. Let's get away from big pharma. Let's access some other holistic things that can help you as well. When I'm talking to new peers who've been addicted to meth for years and now they have a job as a recovery coach, I say the first thing I did when I got a job was I got my teeth fixed, right? Like all these are fake, but it was a wonderful thing for me. So when you get hired as a recovery coach, take advantage of those benefits. Go to a doctor. When I talk to clients, I'm like, when's the last time you've been to a doctor? And I don't mean the emergency room. I mean a primary care doctor. And if you don't have one set up, how can I help you find a doctor? Right? How can I help you find a dentist? And just sharing that with again peers that I supervise, but also the clients that I work with. Then also the last part of this is just the life skills part. Not sending everyone to a recovery group, but sending them to a life skills group, sending them to a cooking class. And if there's not one available, helping to create that. So you send someone to the food bank, they have no idea how to cook. They're shopping in the middle aisle of the grocery store, which is frozen foods, and just talking about that as well, because they may have a hidden strength in the culinary thing that can also help improve their health.
I gotta say, I think this is the first webinar, first online meeting where I ever heard anybody use the word apothecary. So I'm like, that's cool. So Victor, tell us just in case some of us don't know what an apothecary is and what you have in that area.
An apothecary is a shop where you have hundreds of natural herbs where you can go into there and you say, help me with this. And they say, oh, you need dandelion root. You need King's Lion mane. You need this, that, or the other. So the doctor in your hospital will give you all this stuff from big pharma because they're making a profit off of that. But you go to apothecary and they'll give you these herbs from this earth that will address your needs. And oftentimes people of color, you won't see people like me in those stores, right? And so to be able to go through that cultural barrier and introduce your clients to this as you go yourself can also be a wonderful thing as we walk beside people. Hey, let's check this out together. I've never been in the store myself. I'm kind of curious and like, wow, it smells wonderful. Look at all these salts and things. And it's an amazing experience.
Well, when you said that, I wrote a note down, and Sandy gave me a look. But I want to know if there's one near me that I want to go to. I haven't been to one, so I want to go to one. Thank you for that, Victor, very much. Amber.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of what Victor kind of said, because if we're meeting somebody in like an emergency department setting, a lot of time there's, a lot of physical stuff going on, and I try and do my best to say, hey, let's focus on, getting you physically better from the situation, because if somebody's feeling like absolute crap, like it's very overwhelming to be like, oh, well, we can do this and we can do this, and so it's basically just staying in the moment with that person and making them feel comfortable and obviously helping them navigate through the systems because again all of those things take the back burner, what she was talking about, the dental, the like just a regular physical appointment, like those usually go away in active addiction. So just being able to be like, all right, well, what about this, we can maybe look into this. And then also like if someone gets further along, like it was really important for me to start working out again because my physical is directly correlated with my emotional, right? So if I'm not doing exercise for 2 days, I feel it mentally before physically, right? So, the one thing I did was get super involved in, sports when I started my recovery. So the other cool thing about that is like, when you join a sports team or a league of some sort, there's like accountability with it too, right? So there's also these skills that are being learned, like, oh, I got to show up on time. People are counting on me. And it also takes time out of the day, right? So like me, I've kind of gone overboard where it's like I got volleyball Tuesday, pickleball Wednesday, golf, so I've taken it to the next level, but like it's very helpful in early recovery definitely to be involved and get that companionship and everything like that. So
Thank you, Amber. Sandy.
Victor and Amber covered a lot of the things that are on my mind, but for me, I think about this as treating the person as a resource in this place, first of all. I have been an obese woman since young adulthood, up, down, all around. And there is often people approach fitness in one direction. And folks don't understand that they could find the thing that they actually enjoy. I enjoy walking. I don't get to ride my bike as much as I'd like, but I enjoy bike riding. I know, Phil, it's sitting in the shed, blocking your boat. But someday when I retire, I'm going to ride that bike all the time. So I think for folks, and in Rhode Island, since I've been here for about 2.5 years, I'm mostly working with people who have been unhoused or in unstable housing. They have walked and walked and walked and been in uncomfortable circumstances outside. So there's opportunities they may have never experienced in their life. You know, one of the pathways and recovery tools is called forest bathing. And I work with somebody who's like, she's a city girl. She's afraid of grass, but you never know, right? First experience with going with somebody on a forest bathing experience, they might find that that opened up all new avenues for them. So I think just really tuning into the person and finding out what they have experienced. But the other big piece for me, and this stands out loud because I spent 8 hours at the hospital Sunday with one of our children, adult child, and I watched people not being treated well. So when you start talking to folks about using their insurance and getting their first primary care doctor and they have not been treated well, I think you talked about the emotional piece, Phil. I think making sure that, you know, they have somebody they trust alongside them that first time to do some of that advocacy, and that you even kind of talk it through. I watched an aide bring somebody in who was in a wheelchair, didn't call her name, didn't say hello, just went out, grabbed her, brought her in. And so when it was our turn, I complimented her, wished her, hey, you know, good morning, you know, and all of a sudden that same aide was smiling. But when you're carrying the shame of addiction going into that thing, you're not going to know that, you know, tuning in, and I called it buttering the bread, could change your whole experience for you with those professionals who are burnt out in their own way. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Sandy. Ruth.
I've been thinking about my experience this year, Phil, about how all of these systems are interact on one another, and that a physical sickness, and I've been ill with viral stuff for the last several months, really kicks in a lot of mental disquiet, emotional discomfort, as well as being actually physically sick. And it feels like a very out of control and very powerless place. And you know, sort of, I've certainly been to the point in the last months where I've had to, you know, sort of shut down a lot of my thinking, because my thinking or my mental state was being run by my physical illness. And I was not the most trustworthy person I could be for myself. And it was just, I'm not out of the woods entirely yet, but it was just such a scary place. And falling back on certain resources, you know, sort of Sandy's talked about the experience of being in the hospital. You know, sort of, I've had a couple of conversations with my primary care worker, or doctor, over the last several months, and they've been scheduled for a maximum of 20 minutes. And, you know, sort of, I'm just scratching the surface of the issues on my to-do list in that 20 minutes. Never mind trying to balance, you know, sort of the how medical people just want to give you more and more prescriptions. You know, sort of, so it's just, I suppose what I'm saying is that when somebody is physically unwell for whatever reason, sort of it knocks out a lot of the other systems, the mental system, the emotional system. And we need to be, I think, thinking in terms of, again, the whole person, not just the whole body, but the whole person, the whole organism, if we're interacting and trying to support and be of help.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Ruth. And Ruth.
Good morning. Rarely do I sit in a Zoom meeting or any meeting that there's two Ruths in the room. So it's really good to see everyone, especially Phil and Sandy. I was in the C-card training, which was Sandy's first training that she did with Phil. So it's been a long time, and yet it's great to both, and however we've all evolved, I guess. I appreciate your question because this question is part of the introduction question for me. When I was thinking about what achievement physically, I thought, I went straight to like high school softball games. And then I thought, no, actually my biggest achievement was during the pandemic when I actually learned to take a walk on my own every day without earphones, without music, and just in quiet. Because of the circumstance, it led me. I used to think that walking was something social you did with a friend, or you listened to music or a video, or a lecture or something. And yet I learned that why I thought I was walking for the physicality of it, what it really was supporting was my mental state and my emotional state. So it became a necessity, and it became a commitment. And I saw it very similar to anything else we could make a commitment to in recovery, because I'm a clinical health educator with a hospital system in New Jersey, which is where I sit. And we have over 180 recovery specialists and recovery coaches in our team throughout the hospital systems. I offer a Wednesday well-being session online, just like this. And one of the best things about it is just for everyone to get a dose of well-being, whatever that means. And the topic of the day, I might throw out a topic, but then as we all know, it takes its own life. We just finished one today on mental well-being. And what I recognize and I truly believe is self-care is recovery, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't everything you do when you physically put something down, everything else is working on the physical, mental, emotional well-being in order to support who you are and your health. So I think it's completely one. And I offer that as my statement of it's all one. I don't know. If my head's in the right place, my body will move. If my emotions are not okay, I can move my body and clear a little bit of my head space and my emotions get better. So it doesn't matter where it starts. It's a trilogy of self-care. It's a trilogy of well-being, which equals recovery. And that's what I got.
Thank you, Ruth. The old AA thing I heard for decades, move a muscle, change a thought, right? Move a muscle, change a thought. Ed.
Thank you, Phil. I would just pick up where Ruth left off with the four quadrants. I think they are, for me personally, all related. If I'm working on one and not the others, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to work on that one because the physical, emotional, mental, all are related. And if you look at the four quadrants and you step back a distance, you'll see that they're all connected. They all sit next to each other and all encased together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me personally, as a recovery coach, the most important for me always is the physical, because that is the foundation that encompasses the other quadrants as well. There's been a lot of talk, and I've been involved with older adults and substance use. The number one fear for older adults still remains the loss of self-dependency, which goes back to the whole physical body. If I'm not able to take care of myself physically, what help is there for me? And as older adults, we continually work to struggle to maintain our physical dependency because that allows us to take care of ourselves emotionally. It allows us to care of ourselves spiritually as well as mentally. So I am just getting off on this conversation with everyone shares. So thank you very, very much. And I'm going to continue to listen. And Phil, continue to ask those questions.
Okay. I think too that last year I was um, to go to also Ruth's point about when you're not feeling well, how I'm realizing like when I'm in the throes of chemotherapy, like I was last year, and I was being torn apart, I realize, a year later, I'm still suffering some of the physical effects. I mean, that some of the heart damage could be from that, could be who knows what it's from. It doesn't really matter. But I wasn't thinking well. I just sold a boat that I took a big hit on because uh, I just thought I needed a boat last year, and it was just a silly decision, even though my lovely wife tried to talk me out of it. And also get emotionally kind of all over the place when I'm physically not well. And so spiritually, I just, you know, kind of that also suffers in a sense. And everything as my physical health gets better, those things return, my emotional health, my mental health, my spiritual health. So when we talk about working with recoveries, right? And a lot of times we have a few examples in the Recovery Coach Academy with a couple of different self-care assessments with all our curriculum. But most of the time, when people say they're going to make a goal in the Recovery Coach Academy, when you break out and you talk with somebody for a while and you ask them to work on a goal, a lot of the times, and I say the large percentage of the time, it ends up being a physical goal of some kind, like, or a health goal. Like I want to stop smoking, or I want to go back to the gym, or I want to walk more steps. And then they work with a coach about, well, what's the first thing you're going to do to start that? What's the first, cog in the wheel to get that thing turning? What are you going to do first? And so, does anybody have any examples with working with a recovery that they wanted to work on something physical and how that interacted, what that interaction was like, and how did it turn out? Working with a recovery on like a physical goal.
Hey, Phil,
Anybody?
I can't raise my hand for some reason.
Well, how about you, James? Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too, Phil. Sorry, everybody. I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
It's okay.
But I was working with a recovery last year. He was over 300 pounds, was feeling very down about himself. And I sat and talked with him for about 30 minutes, on the importance of working out and how losing weight to make you feel a little better. Because I was over 300 pounds myself at one point. So I sat down with him. I showed him the meal preps that I went through and that I used to help lose weight, and started them off with, if you don't feel comfortable going to the gym, just doing light calisthenics at home, until you feel comfortable enough about going into the gym. And a year later, he's in better shape than I am. He took it, so it all worked out.
Wow, that's a good story. Thank you. Sean.
I mentioned it earlier, but just like sporting events. So RCN, we had a lot of peers that were asking about, getting involved in something more physical. So one of my staff started a softball league, and now that in this, I think it's their second year, and it's so all the other treatment centers and recovery organizations in central Minnesota now all have softball teams, and it's cool to see people out there that have never played any kind of sports. One of our peers that now is a volunteer for us, she is from Somalia and she's never swung a baseball bat. And I watched her get a hold of her first hit, which popped right over the infield. And it was just, to watch that was just, and it's the camaraderie, kind of the team building thing. And so it's really been a good experience.
That's fun. Thank you, Sean. Stefan.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this recovery that I work with who had been recently diagnosed with diabetes. And they were very very concerned. They were very worried, and so I was thinking in just kind of working with them, sitting with them, that they realized that one their early goal was to just really find out more about diabetes and what it would mean for them in terms of their overall health status and how they could manage it. And it seemed very like it was overwhelming for them initially. So I work with them to support them in setting some realistic goals. Well, what can you do? What do you think a first step might be for you? That kind of stuff, asking them some of the questions. So it ended up, that they were able to get a wealth of information. And one of the biggest benefits I think they experience is, to your point, is that the emotional unrest that they were experiencing began to level off as they were able to figure out a plan to get more information and to realize that they could have stability in their life, and it meant making some adjustments for them. So that was really a powerful example for me. But I also wanted to just speak really quickly to your point where you said oftentimes the goal that people come up with is the physical piece, right? And I've seen that too. And I think, for me, right, I think it speaks to that intuitively people know that, they might not have the words and the language to really articulate it or express it all the time, but I believe that intuitively people know, right? That if they're taking the best possible care of themselves, right, that there's benefits that they can experience beyond just the physical realm. So I think, and I believe that intuitively, they don't always really, it doesn't always have shape and form for people, I think, but I think that there's a knowing, right, that is inherent in people about, their well-being.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ed.
I want to just to continue the conversation that Stefan has brought up with the physical. I'm working with someone who is a smoker, and she was hoping to set a goal that she could stop smoking. And she's been doing so, and she's been doing very, very well. She has asthma and other situations. With this very hot, difficult weather we're going through, she would have extremely difficulty breathing. She's not having as rough of a time as she thought she would. Someone else talked to her and said, "Your appearance has changed. Her complexion has changed." So I think when we look at our goals and establish goals, we always think seeing is believing. And so the things that we can actually identify by sight to actually say, I achieved it. Someone else is trying to lose weight, and I got an image of his bathroom scale, and he's lost 10 pounds. His whole attitude has changed. His mental image of himself has changed. His spirituality has changed. Matter of fact, his emotion condition has changed, which is why I keep saying, if we don't take care of the physical aspect, everything else just falls apart on us, which is that whole idea of older adults. If we lose our self-dependency, it's a downhill battle for us to achieve what we are trying to achieve. So
Let me ask you, with the guy that sent you a picture of like losing the 10 pounds, what was your role as coach? What did you suggest, or were you part of it, or what happened?
we sat down and made a list of the things that he could stop eating or consuming.
Oh,
And
and
he made his list.
so what did the list look like? I'm curious.
Okay, no added sugar. He took scotch tape and he taped his sugar bowl.
Did he?
Yes.
Wow.
I said, well, where are you going to put it? I suggested put it on the top shelf in the kitchen cupboard. And he said, no, I got something better. I said, what? I'm going to tape it. I said, fine. He decided what sodas he would not drink.
Oh.
No added sugar, no snacks. And if if the only snack he could have would be before 7 p.m., and it was because he didn't have any snacks for that day before that.
Okay.
So he reduced his calorie intake as well.
Well, sometimes we also think that's a great example, Ed, and that's why I asked you. But, you know, someone was talking about intuitively we know. I think Stefan was talking about that. He came up with a list, knew he
Right.
but he's got to tape his sugar bowl, which is kind of like a great visual and eliminate soda. I mean, that's amazing. And if you're eating a lot of sugar and drinking a lot of soda and you stop that, yeah, especially men, they'll lose weight really quickly, because of their body.
Yes.
Wow.
Phil, as a long person in long-term recovery, I still remember after the first month that people would always ask, "Wow, you look great. What are you doing differently? What are you doing?" And they saw the change in me, as I always say to people in recovery. They see the change in us far before we notice it. But
Exactly.
then when we see it, it gives us that hope that things can change. That's
Yeah.
why I think we go to making changes in our life. We
Hmm.
always go to something that is health related.
Amen. Thank you. Ruth.
Yes, thank you, Phil. I wanted to, also to pick up on something that Stefan said and that you also picked up on, where Stefan was talking about intuitively knowing.
Yeah.
And I flashed immediately on our spectrum of attitudes in the Recovery Coach Academy, where we talk very specifically about how in our role as recovery coaches or as peers, we're working with individuals as resources, and we're vesting in everyone the expertise on their own life. So, two experts in the conversation. You're the expert on your life. I'm the expert on mine. And this is such a core principle of the work that we do, that, sort of I was so thrilled to hear it directly brought into this conversation. And even, sort of even when we're ill, even when we're physically challenged, even when we're emotionally all over the place, sort of even when, sort of we're mentally a bit out to lunch, at the end of the day, we're still the experts on our own lives. And the support that we get from each other and from others is premised on respecting that truth about us. And that's how it works. And it's just so great to hear it brought directly into this conversation this morning.
Thank you, Ruth. Anybody else? All right, what's that? Another question. Anybody have any like dramatic physical change that they want to talk about in their body or their system and how that happened and what that was like? And did you have coaching or did you decide on your own? Were there people that helped you do that? Anybody at all? Hannah, good to hear from you.
Hey, cool. Thank you, Phil. And hey, Michael and Tito, other people, familiar people I see in here. I'm really grateful to be here. Yeah, so I had quit smoking cigarettes myself back in December. And but I had did that. I had some nicotine gum that came in handy. But how that had occurred in the first place is through the organization I work for. We have these self-care partners that we have, and we're assigned different ones, and we mix them all up, and each person is matched up with the accountability partner. And then you have two self-care goals throughout the year, and then you and your accountability partner check in with each other at least once a month, but it ends up being a little more than that organically. And so they have two self-care goals, and then you have two self-care goals. And one of my self-care goals was to quit smoking because my other self-care goal was to try and get back in the gym. And those two things just did not go hand in hand. And then I learned the hard way that it was going to be, well, I shouldn't say the hard way. I came to a point where I was like, I'm going to have to pick one or the other. I'm gonna have to either pick to continue to smoke to like help alleviate whatever it is or whatever the reasons I smoke cigarettes, or continue to go to the gym because the two were just like oil and water was not gonna mix. And so I ended up choosing the gym because I had already seen like some small benefits of like, going to the gym on a regular basis or trying my best to. Because I was also, if I'm being honest, I was also being held to a level of accountability, right? Not only by myself, but by my accountability partner. And
Yeah.
so that has been really effective and helpful in my recovery process in general, overall, just like overall. I've been practicing having an accountability partner and what that looks like for maybe this is the third year now. And I can't like shout it from the rooftops enough how helpful it's been to have that accountability partner, a peer to check in with, and the importance of self-care goals and the importance of self-care, which is what I've kind of been hearing us touching on a little bit. So thanks for
Right.
letting me share.
Well,
Appreciate
I
it.
want to ask you a question. When you say accountability partner, what is the role of an accountability partner?
Like my definition of a role of
Yeah,
accountability
yours.
partner, just my experience.
Yeah, both. Your experience. What's the role of one?
Um, I'll just speak from my own experience. How I be a accountability partner is I check in with the person, I see where they're at. We also have a percentage, so you do your best to get like the percentage, and then you say, "Hey, where are you at?" And you want to try to be over a certain percentage each month, because then when we have our staff meeting, everybody checks in specifically on that goal. And so I think we have to be at like a 87.5%. That's our goal as a whole overall team. So then you check in with each other. But what I do is I just check in and like ask how their self-care goals are going. I'd be really specific when I ask them. I don't just, be like, hey, how's your self-care goals going? All right, cool. Yeah, have a good day. Bye. Really specific. I try to be as best as I can on each goal. Ask them how they're doing, if they had any, difficulties or barriers or, based on their percentage. But the main thing I do is like motivate, acknowledge, uplift, like, celebrate, encourage, like, yeah, man, kind of like that cheerleader role that we have as recovery coaches as well. And then vice versa. They do the same for me. So hopefully
So
that answers.
when you're accountable, what happens if they don't do what they're supposed to do?
There's a circumstances, I guess, as to why somebody wouldn't be able to meet their goal. And in my experience, the other person has been pretty transparent about that. And I just acknowledge that as well. I now that I'm thinking about it, and people always ask the hardest questions when you're on the spot. When I think about it, I guess my default would be to like chalk it up to human experience and not to beat themselves up about it, but to just continue from where they're at now. What are you going to do moving forward? Like, is there something going to look different? And sometimes things are like isolated incidences or one-time things that kind of mess up your flow, maybe to keep your goal on track. But yeah.
Yeah, so okay. I just always go to the words, right? So if I'm accountable to something, I think there's like a circumstance or repercussion if I don't do what I said I was going to do. And I was just curious if what that would be. Like if one of your team doesn't, if you're not at 87.5%, do you guys get all dock your pay or something for like you
Oh,
don't get
okay, I
paid
get
for
you
two
now.
weeks or something?
I get you now. So in my experience as well, people have seen the benefits of these self-care goals and the accountability partner. And so it is kind of like a team morale thing because when we all check in, everybody checks in with their
Okay.
percentage. And then it kind of, it's like a thing where
Office
it'll
thing.
affect the overall team's percentage.
Yeah. Like, see, that Stefan wrote office shaming. Like, if you're having an
Ah,
organization, you like
no, we
everybody in the office gets shamed.
we also get incentives if we meet our quota or mark. So at the end of the year, we can
Oh, so there's an
self-care.
incentive. So,
Yep,
okay. All right.
self-care gift cards. But I promise you, the journey up into that self-care gift card is way more incentive, but
Gotcha.
it doesn't come to be revealed or to fruition until, you
Okay.
continue on.
Anybody else have undergone? Well, so I'll talk a little bit about a change I made at actually it was at my daughter's college graduation, our last daughter's, where uh, I've been having off and on in my life, I've had issues with caffeine. I just, I know I'm just not like, I still have this addictive personality that if one cup of coffee is good, 10 must be better. And then, I ended up with heart racing and, gut doing all this. And so I gave up caffeine again, so it's been like 6 or 7 weeks and I got to hold myself, I don't know if I'm holding myself accountable, but I'm just telling you that I feel so much better not drinking coffee, not on big caffeine than I do with it. So, there's part of me that's still the addict that likes those first few sips and that rush and that pick me up and let's get fired up and go. But that's not good for me overall. It's not good for my health overall. So, that's one change that I've made recently. And I'm also trying to move farther and farther away from any type of processed foods, like eat around the outside of your grocery store and not the middle rows. And again, it's that saying that if your grocery store has a health food section, what's in the rest of the store? Like, okay, what's in the rest of the store then? Anybody else made any like big changes lately, health wise, or anything they want to share about? Anybody else with any other thoughts about the physical quadrant, health and recovery coaching?
Hey, this is Tito,
Hi,
from Milwaukee,
Tito.
Wisconsin. Uh, this is a really good topic. Confirmation, definitely for sure. Um, I went to the doctor, and for myself, uh, I didn't think I had an issue, but nonetheless, finding out that I'm obese and things of that nature, and for the this part of like in recovery coaching, like I want to say like last year, I went and I took on this course called through ISSA as a CPT, and I'll for I can only speak for myself. Like as for recoveries, even when I encouraged, getting involved with physical fitness, th- there wasn't there wasn't much that they were able to do based on the population that I was serving in. So what I will say is, calling myself out, like, maybe I could have been a little bit more optimistic in questioning, right? But there were some barriers I was hitting because physical fitness for people with chronic symptoms of disabilities could be at large. But it's definitely a need that needs to be kind of like touched on a little bit more than it usually is because there's a lot of health and wellness that comes with it. Um, And yeah, just kind of wanted to check in and share that, with my experience in physical fitness for myself, I just started intermittent fasting. Um, and it's not lovely. It's challenging. So I could only imagine if I'm wanting to have somebody else to work on some physical fitness, I might want to first try some things myself before I try to be an example or I'm not saying that I can't be a resource, but it's helpful to have some knowledge and some experience to be able to correlate and communicate with the recovery who we are asking or I'm asking somebody to work on some physical fitness. Um, but it early on in like when I did time in prison, physical fitness changed my like perception. I was on a ton of medication for PTSD, borderline personality, all these clinical stage, all this medication I was on in prison. Um, and the doctor said in prison that if I wanted to get to a lower minimum, I would need to get off these medications because I would have to not be a risk. And so I used the gym as an opportunity, and I was a lot more stable than when I first came in. So I'll just say that physical fitness does tremendous things if you allow it with its own process. But that's all I got. Thank you. I appreciate it, and just checking in.
Thank you, Tito. Nathan, I want to hear from you because, anything you have to say about this topic and anything you might have gone through recently.
Well, a few things. Ruth R., thank you for your honesty and vulnerability about life because yeah, I think I sort of hit a point where I just was burned out, meltdown, didn't know what was going, everything moving really fast. And so slowing down has been a change I've had to make. But when you asked Phil about sort of a good coaching thing, the one instance that came to me was with accountability, an example of accountability. A guy came to me and he said, "Will you please help me because I need to not talk like I attend 12-step meetings in my job interview." Because he said that was the only language he'd spoken for 2 years. And I said, okay. And he said, "So can you help me?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "You call me every morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. And as soon as you mention a word that I think about a 12-step program, I'm going to hang up on you." And like, that was the accountability. I hung up. Our first call was 8 seconds. And then I think we got to like 33 seconds. And then within a couple of weeks, we had like a whole 5-minute conversation where he didn't mention honesty, acceptance, gratitude, humility, something. But so I don't know if it was a good coach, but it definitely was accountability. So yeah. And then my instant thought when you were talking about physical change was I've been working with someone who their mom has had to move in with them. And so their mom has brought all their furniture and she has no physical space anymore. And how she's navigating that physical feeling of not having any space in her home. I could just instantly feel the physical pain when you were talking about physical needs. And I think, and that's a really hard thing to navigate. They're the mementos that mom wants to keep with them until they pass away. But at the same time, if y'all know the size of flats and houses in London, England, two homes combined into one leaves 12 inches to live in. So yeah, yeah. So all good. But yeah, physical change is, yeah, I think it's just a part, everything has a physical impact on something. Yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for showing up today. Appreciate you, as you know it, as you know. Anybody else? So we spent a lot of times talking about uh, this physical quadrant. And I love some of the examples where I think, Ed, you were talking about just being a mirror and reflecting, like, I see a change in you. And when they do make those physical changes, like stopping smoking cigarettes or whatever it may be, I see the change. And sometimes that's a huge motivator in and of itself. I see you. I see what you're doing. Congratulations. You look better, keep doing what you're doing. Um, I think there's many strategies, and many of you have heard of the Phoenix, which it's a recovery organization based on getting together and improving physical fitness, and recovery principles. And usually the Phoenix is nationwide and expanding. So Scott Strode just came out with a book too about his journey. So those are also resources for recoveries to talk about if they didn't want to do it alone or they wanted to go, or maybe you guys check it out with a recovery. I follow Chelsea Dewitt, who is on Duett, who is part of the Phoenix, and she's on Instagram, and I've been watching her for 7 years and her physical ability just continues to improve all the time. And that's hopeful for me. as we talk about this, I think I have a, like Sandy said, we raised a family of athletes, and one of them is a physical therapist. One of them is a trainer for the Equinox, which is kind of like out in Chicago. He's doing really well. He's just 22, but he put together a plan for me to go back to the gym and start easy, but I also wanted to get the clearance from my cardiologist. So one of the things that I'm going to look into is talking to my cardiologist, seeing if I can start this exercise program and seeing if I can get back to the gym. So that's kind of like one of the things that I want to do for myself physically. I do walk a lot with the dog. I'm out on the water. I paddled in yesterday because my battery ran out of my kayak, but I like doing that too. So I like to be on my feet and outdoors as much as possible to just continue to try to maintain. And I do think I could drop some weight, so I'm going to look into doing that too. Anybody here want to talk a little bit about something they might want to improve physically?
Ruth had her hand up earlier from prior.
Okay, Ruth.
Right. Thank you, Michael, and
Mm.
thank you, Phil. Yes, I wanted to build on something that Nathan said, Phil.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Where Nathan was talking about the woman whose mother moved all her stuff in, and now they have very little or almost no living space. And that speaks to something that I've been thinking about for the entire hour. We were talking about the four quadrants, but I wonder, and you know me of old, Phil, I do this. I wonder if there isn't a fifth that would make it a quintile, I think. I'm thinking that that the material is also something that we need to pay attention to. How is our material health? And again, I noticed when I was, sort of when I was particularly ill, that, sort of obviously, sort of my housekeeping deteriorated.
Oh, yeah.
And sort of clothes that I would have hung up in my Virgo way were sort of strewn over couches and, sort of that kind of nothing, sort of nothing awful, but definitely a material space out of control. And also I think we get very disturbed and upset about money issues and the impact of downturn in our finances. I heard somebody say at a meeting once, it's very hard to be spiritual when you've no money in the bank. Sort of, and so I'm just wondering whether that material realm is something that we need to be thinking about wellness in the context of wellness, sort of in addition to the four quadrants that we brought in at the top of the meeting.
Yeah, fair point. Great point. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Michael, were you, Nitha?
Yeah, Nitha. Yeah.
I just love the fact that you mentioned that sort of word wellness, because I've really struggled to navigate like some of the conversations happening around recovery and wellness. And I was at an event a week ago, and it was about well-being in the workplace, and all these people spoke, and I just asked at the end, is anybody doing anything around addiction or recovery? And just no, but so how do we even, incorporate this into people's normal well-being language? Because I just feel like even the whole concept of addiction and recovery sits separate to people being well or well-being, So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Understood. Michael, did you have something?
No. I was just saying that Nitha had her hand up, but Ruth has her hand up now.
So go ahead. I want you to say something else.
Thank you. I think Nathan and I are a bit of a double act here this morning, um, because I very much wanted to pick up on what you were saying there, Nathan. Um, in the Recovery Coach Academy, and it's dynamite material, we have the stages of recovery model, which effectively talks about wellness across the recovery lifetime. Sort of formally up to sort of 11 plus years, the fulfillment stage that Phil added to Kathleen O'Connell's original model, which is, I mean, the stages of recovery model is in itself something of a to-do list for wellness. And it's out there way beyond triage and stabilization, which are the stages where so much conversation about recovery is mired, as if, sort of recovery were some kind of fait accompli after, let's say, maximum of a year, rather than being an ongoing undertaking with milestones and tasks out over the years, that we want to incorporate into our personal wellness plans and our regimen for daily living. So I wanted to throw that out because I do think the stages of recovery model is one of the many jewels in the Recovery Coach Academy program.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think there's some, and it was touched on here in different ways, but there's also some like, as a recovery coach, do we have an ethical consideration or ethical obligation to maintain ourselves physically? Do we? That's a question for you. Why or why not?
Can excuse me,
Mike,
can I
go
hop in on
ahead.
that? Wow, that's a big one, man. Wow, you really threw the fastball.
Right.
Yes, and right, I think
Yeah.
I believe, right, that imperative has to come from within. Yes, right. And I always this invariably whenever I do the RCA, this conversation in some ways comes up, right? What is your ethical obligation as a coach, as a peer, et cetera, right, to maintaining your own wellness, right? Because I tend to try to frame it in that way, right? Your
Yeah.
wellness, because as we've been talking about, right, looking at the interconnecting, the interrelational of each of these dimensions, right? Where you started, right? So it's been my experience generally that people are going to be at different places with that, right? People who are fully on board, yes, if I'm going to be a role who really embrace it, if I'm going to be a role model, then I do have an ethical duty, a responsibility rather, to take care of myself and to show up and to be present and available and all that stuff in the most efficient way that I can. And then others who, that hasn't come to light for them yet, right? That they're not reflecting upon it the same kind of way. So I mean, for me, right, as a person who is a person in long-term sustained recovery myself, and as a recovery coach, facilitator, and trainer, and all this wonderful stuff that we get to do. Absolutely. I believe that wholeheartedly, and also recognizing that is part of the journey for others.
Thank you, Michael.
So I was an emergency department recovery coach for 3.5 years. And I remember the first year, I felt like this plane was going up, and I felt like, oh, my responsibility is to make sure that this plane doesn't fall. So for that year, I wouldn't take days off. I wouldn't do anything. I was just making sure that this plane was flying. And I remember the following year, I felt ill and I was diagnosed with diabetes. And it came real quick too. right? Something that I didn't even pay mind to because I was worried about other people, right? But I wasn't worried about my own physical being, right? Looking out for me, and ended up in the ICU for 3 days, right? Almost died, right? I was at right there to at the edge, and then it's some time to think about what the hell do I need to be doing, right? From now on, and to take care of myself. And it just wait, let me, Marletta, I can hear you. But yeah, I just say yes, I agree. You do. You have to take care of yourself, because if you're not here, Phil, then what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen and Michael. And I agree. I think yes. I can't remember the exact wording of your question, but maybe is it ethical? Can you say that again, Phil, really quickly?
Do you
Sorry.
have do we have, as recovery coaches, an ethical obligation to take care of ourselves physically?
Yes, I do. And then I can't speak for everybody else, but I do. And I also tend to overthink things and overcomplicating things. But then if I get down to the basis of it, being physically well, um, is beneficial for me and my well-being. And then if I'm good, I can take care of other people. I can show up for other people in a good way. And being physically healthy has ripple effects. And if me making the choice to be a healthy individual and another recovery coach and whatever they may do, but if I make the choice to be physically healthy, and that's a good move for me, then that's a good move for me, and it's like if it helps me be more effective as a recovery coach, then even better. It's like I might be able to reach people that I hadn't been able to before had I not made that choice to be physically healthy. So yeah.
Yeah, I think when I think about you recently, and congratulations, by the way, on giving up smoking since December. That's amazing. Well, good for you. Um, that if you were working with a recovery who wanted to give up smoking and you were still smoking, you're kind of in a like, huh? I know you could do it, but you could assist and you could coach the person, but it puts it in kind of like a that position where they could say, well, you smoke, so what's the big deal, right? Or whatever, if you were still smoking. So, but you could ask good questions and you could work your way around it. And I think it just, I think coaching, when you have that skill, you can be honest and address it, like saying, yeah, I have a few pounds to lose myself, and I've been thinking about doing that too. I hear that you want to do it. So, uh, but again, it's like, I don't know why this example came into my head. I'm a little off there, but like, would you like take advice if you wanted to organize your home from a hoarder? I don't know why I came up with that, but it's kind of like an extreme example. I had one of my doctors, and he was a GI specialist, was obese. And I didn't, I listened to what he had to say, but it just kind of made me wonder, physician, heal thyself, or what's going on with that. So, um, I guess a lot of it has to do with, like Stefan was saying, is this, if we are promoting wellness, don't we have to reflect some kind of wellness, or do we? That's the question. And usually the one that gets ignored the most, I'm just saying in general, in recovery circles, is the physical realm. And I don't know why that is. Ed.
Um, I'm in agreement that we should be always focusing on our self-care. We look at the code of conduct, ethics conduct as a recovery coach. One of them is do no harm. So I want to make sure that I'm not doing harm to others. But it also reminds us that we must ourselves improve and give our best. And how can I give my best if I am not physically well or at my
Okay.
peak?
Okay. Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's a big I think too that when what does Bill White say about 12-step programs in the Recovery Coach Academy? He says where it's like in AA, it was an abstinence-based or organization or program, but often nicotine and caffeine were excluded from the drugs, right? Nicotine and caffeine were excluded. Like those two don't count, because it's better than what you were doing. And I think there's been a lot of movements in the advent of AA about the nicotine part, not so much the caffeine. And caffeine is, I realize many people do really well on it. For me, it became, I enjoy it. I love the taste, but I had to come to the conclusion that it's toxic for me. It's harming my health. And I just have to let that go. That's just me. And the next big one, and Sandy and I have gone back and forth many times with this, is sugar. That we have to really, I just love the story about taping your sugar bowl. We don't have a sugar bowl, but, um, I love cake. I just love cake. Not even so much like cookies. I love cake and I love like ice cream. And do I give that up? Maybe, maybe. Stefan.
Thank you for, excuse me, thank you for being honest. Who doesn't love cake? Something's wrong with someone who doesn't love cake. But anyway, I know it's like judgment there, right? Slight judgment. But really, I wanted to say, right, because when earlier when you mentioned coffee, right, like I mentioned, I just got in this morning at 12:30 from Morocco. I was there for like 8 days. And the one thing that I have, and I've resisted the temptation so far to make, but the one thing I've been desiring is just a real cup of coffee, like how I'm accustomed to it,
Yeah.
because over there it's like, the really strong coffee and they're like, you want coffee with milk? Yeah, but it still doesn't taste the same. So, but I was thinking about like, and to your point of just like for me, how ingrained it is, right? To have that coffee and how it is deeply such a part of the culture of 12-step programs, right?
Yeah.
Coffee, cigarettes kind of waning some, right? Some, but coffee, tons, big old pot of coffee always available. So, but yeah, I just was having a stream of consciousness as you were talking about coffee.
Right. What do you need to start a new meeting in AA? Resentment and a coffee pot, right? That's all you need for a new meeting. Jean.
So during the last Recovery Coach Academy, one of the participants said, well, because of multiple pathways and people are in recovery when they say they are, is it prudent for the certified peer recovery specialist to be practicing abstinence? And he said, like, what about cannabis? It's legal now. And I said, yeah, alcohol has been legal for hundreds of years. And so in my opinion, it's like, I would love to see everybody get to a point of abstinence, and that includes things like even nicotine and caffeine. But he said, well, if I'm a certified peer recovery, I have lived experience. But if I use cannabis, does that not make me a quality certified peer recovery specialist?
And you
I said,
responded how?
that's your path. And I said, but just be aware that if you share that part of your story with a peer who's struggling with cannabis or thinks that, well, it's probably okay. And I said, somebody new in recovery, that might be an absolutely slippery slope. And I have a lot of peers that have their medical card, and a lot of them are Department of Corrections parolees that got it so that they don't fail a UA. And my thing to them is if you're doing it to beat the system or to get around something and it's really, you're just looking for the mood altering chemical, let me know how it works out for you. Not my place to judge. I can't tell you what your path is, but unfortunately, a high percentage of the folks that I know that go to cannabis use return to their drug of choice.
Yeah, I would say to that too, it would be, um, our like Art Woodard was fabulous at saying our lived experience when he first started as like an alcohol counselor, his lived experience and his story was 95% of how he interacted with people, his own story, his own pathway. At the end, it was less than 5% because his story, your own pathway and your own story become irrelevant down the road because you've become so skilled at asking questions and understanding and being curious and other focused that you're so my only question would be is, if I had coaches that were using cannabis, I would ask them, how do you think this affects your role? Is it
Right,
helpful or harmful? Are you better or worse? How do you
right,
manage it? Is it, if I even knew about it? That's the other thing. I'm not even
right,
sure I'd know
right.
about if they were using it or not. But if it came
Well,
up, there must have been a reason why it came up. But
well,
sometimes, and you also know in the Recovery Coach Academy, people just like to, they just like to poke at the facilitator to,
right.
one up them. So the
Well, and it,
the classic go-to line is, so he just raised a great question, group. What do you think of it?
right. And his, so when I answered like I did, his rebuttal was, well, LEDCs can drink and use.
Yeah.
And I said again, to me, it's how effective are they? And
Uh-huh.
does it affect your job performance? In Minnesota, the guidelines put out by the Department of Health are a return to use isn't necessarily a disqualifier if it doesn't affect your work performance and it's an isolated incident. Because one of our role plays, and I think it's one put out by
Yeah,
CCAR, is
it is.
where he says, your coworker says, "Well, I had a rough weekend and I ended up drinking, and what do you do with it?" And I said, "Well, if he's coming to me as a colleague, I'm going to tell him you need to report that to your supervisor, talk to your supervisor. If he chooses not to, then the question is, what do you do with it?" And it's like,
Well,
it's
it's also if it's also how he views that. Yeah, that's a big one. That's good old Ricardo.
yeah. Ricardo, yeah, there you go, yeah,
It's a good old Ricardo. He talks about
right,
he causes a lot of trouble, that guy Ricardo,
right,
but in good trouble.
yeah.
All right, guys, we've hit our time. That went by fast. So just worked out the upcoming schedule for with Michael. So the next one we're actually going to move to Friday 7/25. It's going to be our next one, July 25th, Friday. And so thank you for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the day. There is no other reason for living but to enjoy life. So take care of all. Thank you so much.